Hey yo guys, Toy Terrible here, my name is Michael and I'm back with some more Shadowverse. So today we'll be going over the deck list I used in my last video, Lord Atomy. This deck is definitely a meme deck because it mainly focuses on getting out the somewhat unviable card Lord Atomy by turn 4 or 5 and then just hitting your opponent in the face with it and hoping they don't have a way to deal with it. That being said, it actually does have components of pretty viable decks in the current meta, Last Words and aggressive Shadowcraft decks. This is because Lord Atomy synergizes well with them both. It is a giant beat stick that can come out early game and deal a lot of damage to face to opponents if they don't have a way to deal with it. And because it destroys everything on the board when it's played, it can do pretty well with some Last Words cards. Without further ado, let's get into the deck. So the first card in this deck list is Scooby, and Scooby is just a good card to have in this deck because it is a good early game aggressive card. You can play it early game and hopefully get a little bit of extra damage towards face, and even late game because it is a cheap follower, you can play it alongside a bunch of other followers and then hopefully play Lord Atomy. While this deck does enjoy having ways to flood the board, it doesn't run other 1-point followers because it has enough trouble with keeping a hand as it is. Oftentimes you'll dump your entire hand onto the board, play Lord Atomy, and just kind of not have a hand and not have a board. So running too many 1-drops would make you top deck badly a lot of the time. So 3 1-drops is enough, and Skullbeast are those 3 1-drops. Because this deck often has the trouble of having no hand, Soul Conversion is a pretty good card to run. It's a cheap way to draw 2 extra cards, and while it does come at the cost of an allied follower, this deck has a lot of followers that you can use. You can use Skullbeast, you can use the ghosts generated by Dark Conjurer, Voices of Resentment, Playful Necromancer, or Phantom Howl. You can use Lurching Corpse, which is actually a pretty good synergy. You can use it even on Bone Chimera, the skeletons generated by Bone Chimera, or the ultimate carrot from Gourmet Emperor Kaiser. Because you cannot play Lord Atomy onto a board that actually has 5 followers already, you may sometimes even want to use Soul Conversion to get rid of one of your own followers, so then you can then play Lord Atomy. It's a pretty good card, and it will often help you keep games going when you think you've run out of fuel. The next card in this deck is Spartoy Sergeant, and there's not really much to say about him. He's a 2.22, which means he can hit face for 2 damage if need be, and he's mainly there to help with the consistency of 2-point drops. His fanfare is okay, but it's not amazing because this deck oftentimes does not have any trouble generating shadows as it is. So the next card in this deck is Dark Conjurer, who's just another 2.22. However, she does have a really good added effect. She summons a ghost, which is a 1.11 with Storm, if you have an evolved allied follower in play. This can really help with aggression because you can hit face with that ghost, but more importantly, this helps with summoning Lord Atomy because it means you get 2 bodies on the field for only 2 points, and Lord Atomy needs 4 bodies if you want to play him at 0 cost. Unfortunately, you can really only use this effect on turn 4 and beyond because that's when you get the evolve points, but even so, helping get out Lord Atomy and having that extra aggressive edge is really good for this deck, and this card is pretty solid. Lurching Corpse may seem like an odd option to run in this deck, but it's actually pretty good because this deck has a lot of solid last word synergies. For example, Soul Conversion, the Erd you see here, and of course Lord Atomy himself, who destroys all followers on your side of the board when he's played. And destroying Lurching Corpse is actually pretty solid because you can not only establish your own 8/8, you can also destroy one of your opponent's followers. Lurching Corpse is only a 1/2, so it doesn't have that much offensive presence, but oftentimes your opponent will leave it alone because they don't want to activate its last words, which means it can actually stick on the board, keep doing damage, and get its effect when you want to get its effect. So it's a really solid card in this deck. It may not be an MVP, but it's pretty great. Gourmet Emperor Kaiser may seem like another odd option, but he's pretty solid. Although 3.22 is not amazing, the ultimate carrot is a 2.22 that keeps regenerating itself back into your hand when it's destroyed. That's really great because this deck struggles with hand advantage, so having a free 2.22 to play every turn is great. The ultimate carrot and Kaiser himself can both hit face to get a little bit of chip damage in, and the ultimate carrot can also help summon Lord Atomy because it's just played as a 2.22 on the board. You can even play it after you play Lord Atomy to maintain a bigger board presence after you've used Lord Atomy and nuked yourself. So although Kaiser isn't anything super crazy, he's a pretty solid part of the backbone of this deck. Voices of Resentment is one of the best cards Rise of Bahamut has given the Lord Atomy deck. Although generating 2 ghosts for 3 points may seem a bit bad, being able to put those 2 bodies on the board for only 3 points and 1 card is actually pretty great because it means you're not giving up that much hand advantage, and it can help you summon Lord Atomy faster. In fact, with this card, you can actually get Lord Atomy out on turn 3 by playing a Skull Beast on turn 1, any 2-point follower or even another Skull Beast on turn 2, and then playing Voices of Resentment on turn 3, hitting face with both ghosts, and playing Lord Atomy. So that's pretty crazy. Occasionally you will actually use the enhance effect of giving the summon ghosts Bane. This will be used often near the end of the game if you have a board or you have Lord Atomy on the board where the opponent has been putting up a lot of wards. You can use this to remove the opponent's wards and then hit face with whatever you have left. This card also works well in the aggressive aspect of the deck because the 2 ghosts have Storm, they can hit face for 2 damage, and you can even use them with Cerberus' Coco and Mimi to get a little bit of extra damage. So Voices of Resentment is a pretty good card. It does have to be used situationally, but it's really great in this deck. Bone Chimera is another part of the backbone of this deck. Although its stats, 3 points for 1/1, aren't so great, its last words are really important in helping with Lord Atomy. It can itself be traded into an opponent to generate those 2 skeletons, which gives you more bodies on the board to hopefully play Lord Atomy off of, or you can play Lord Atomy when Bone Chimera is whole and get not only the 8/8 but also 2 1/1s, which may not seem super great, but they can be used to chip down the opponent, they can be used for soul conversion, or they can be used to set up the board for another Lord Atomy if your first one gets removed. So Bone Chimera doesn't look so great, but it's actually really solid in this deck because it synergizes very well with Lord Atomy. Though she is a gold card, is actually one of the weaker cards in this deck because she really only synergizes with Lurching Corpse and Bone Chimera. You don't want to play her onto the ultimate carrot from Gourmet Emperor Kaiser. However, the synergy with Bone Chimera is what makes her worth running, because if you play Bone Chimera on turn 3, then on turn 4 and use her on the Bone Chimera, you get 4 bodies on the board, one of them which is still Bone Chimera, and that's enough to play Lord Atomy and get the Lord Atomy Bone Chimera synergy, so it kind of snowballs from there. And that's pretty great. If you're desperate, you can play her on Lurching Corpse to remove one of your opposing enemy followers. Sometimes you will have to do that if you're being threatened by aggro. You run her over Necro Assassin because she doesn't actually remove any followers from the board when played, which means you can hopefully get out Lord Atomy a little bit more easily with her than with Necro Assassin. Playful Necromancer is one of the best cards in this deck, because at the cost of 4 points and only 1 evolution, you can actually get 3 bodies on the board, meaning that you really only needed 1 more body from previous to be able to play Lord Atomy. Playful Necromancer has kind of awkward stats. 5/4 doesn't really trade well into the 4/5s that other evolution followers have, but she is enough to trade into one smaller thing, and the 2 ghosts can hit face for a bit of extra damage before you play Lord Atomy. She will take up the evolution for the turn, which is really unfortunate, but the fact that she puts 3 bodies on the board, which is only 1 less than you summon Lord Atomy, for only 4 points and an evolution, means that she's a 3 of, because she really helps get Lord Atomy out early. Phantom Howl was run in the original pre-Rise of Bahamut Lord Atomy deck, and it's definitely run in the post-Bahamut Lord Atomy deck, because it's basically Lord Atomy in 1 turn. If you have the 5 shadows necessary, or the 4 shadows necessary actually, and you play this card, you get 4 bodies on the board, all of which can hit face, and then that's enough to play Lord Atomy. Unfortunately, if you have 5 bodies on the board, but the opponent doesn't have anything for you to trade into, this doesn't allow you to play Lord Atomy because you do need that 1 extra space, so be careful when playing this card. However, this card isn't just good at summoning Lord Atomy, it's also good as an aggressive card in general, especially when paired with Cerberus and an evolution, because that can do up to 11 damage, which is only 1 away from KOing them if you've also hit them with Lord Atomy's 8 attack. So this card is really great because it both facilitates Lord Atomy and helps the deck win through aggression. Cerberus is a Shadowcraft legendary that's run in almost every Shadowcraft deck, and this Lord Atomy deck is no exception. It's a really good card, and the Coco and Mimi can be comboed with all of the ghost generators in this deck to push a little bit of extra damage towards face, and they can even be used for board control. Her stats aren't great, but they are just enough when evolved to take down opposing evolved 4/4s and 4/5s. And in general, she's just a very good card that helps facilitate this deck's way of winning games aggressively. So the last 2 cards in this deck are the ones that really make this deck fun to play. Ceridwen is an interesting card because she's usually not very good. However, in this Lord Atomy deck, where you get Lord Atomy out before you play her, she's amazing. So Lord Atomy is a really big card on turn 3, 4, or 5, but he's actually kind of easy to remove. You can use Dance of Death, and Evolution plus a previous board can often finish him off. So if you lose your Lord Atomy, what do? Well, the next turn you play Ceridwen, you evolve it, and you get another Lord Atomy right back. This card really only combos with Lord Atomy, so that's why you only play 2 of them, because otherwise it will pull out maybe Cerberus and maybe Playful Necromancer, which aren't so great. But pulling out Lord Atomy with this card is just absolutely hilarious. It does require one of your evolutions, which is unfortunate, so if you draw this card after you out of evolutions, it's really only a 5.44, but this card is definitely worth running for the memes. Death's Breath is kind of an odd card to run in this deck, because although it does flood the board and help play Lord Atomy, that's not super helpful because you're trading in at least 3 2/2s and 3 2/3s if you actually got the Necromancer effect to play 1/8/8, which isn't amazing. But it's still worth playing in this deck because it helps you have a little bit of late game versus aggro in case you're raising aggro and you're fighting hard for the board. Another important thing it does is it can push that last bit of board presence and damage towards face that you need to finish them off. 3 2/3s is pretty significant and can really pressure your opponent if they don't have a way of getting rid of it. So Death's Breath is a really good card. This deck doesn't usually make it to the late game and doesn't usually win if you make it to the late game, which is why there's only 2 of them. But it really does help with going up against aggro, and sometimes with getting out Lord Atomy, but most of the times just with finishing the opponent off. And now we move on to the king himself, the reason this deck is built, Lord Atomy. So this card is hilarious. It is a 9.88, which isn't amazing, but if you have 4 cards in play, and in this case it'd mainly be 4 followers because there are no amulets in this deck, you get to play a 0.88, which is incredible. Most of the times you will get this out on turn 4 with like Phantom Howl and trading one of the ghosts in, or any combination of previous followers plus Playful Necromancer. There's a lot of ways to get this card out, and they're all pretty great. An 8/8 on turn 4 is pretty difficult to deal with, not impossible, but it's mainly for the fun of being able to play this card, and then watch as your opponent struggles to deal with it, and then hitting him in the face for 8 damage, or even 10 damage if you want to evolve it. Lord Atomy is an interesting way to end games. It overwhelms a lot of opponents, actually, and comboing it with things like Bone Chimera and Lucian Corpse means that you don't completely lose if they just remove your Lord Atomy. Ceridwen also combos well with Lord Atomy. Cerberus does a little bit if you want to give Lord Atomy a little bit more attack. But yeah, so in terms of mulliganing for Lord Atomy, you do want him in your opening hand, because without him, your deck just kind of flails around as a half Last Words, half aggro Shadowcraft, which isn't very helpful. So this is the king right here, and he often does and can win games, even when playing in Masters. So yeah, that's the deck. If you liked the video, please leave a like or subscribe. I plan to do more decklist videos as well as more laddering videos with some interesting decks in the future. Feel free to leave suggestions below and I will get to them as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.